So we've made it to our second episode of Dear
Wow.
Episode number 2. Hello, Rach. How
Yay!
are you?
We need some sound effects, like
Yeah.
cheer squad.
Boom
I'm
tish.
good. I'm really good. I'm in Melbourne, so I'm actually on the same time, in the same time zone as you for a change.
Yes, because normally you are in Perth,
Yeah.
and at the moment Perth is 3 hours behind.
Yes. It's funny because yesterday I came to Melbourne from Brisbane and I rang my mum and said, "Why aren't you going to the thing that you usually go to?" She's like, I'm not going for another hour. I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that I'd been in Brisbane and now I'm in Melbourne." So
Yeah, I think for you in particular, it's a bit of a washing machine of time
yeah.
zones.
Why can't Australia just all be one time zone? Like that's what I want
Look,
to know.
why can't the Eastern Seaboard be one time zone is a
Yeah,
question.
that would at least be helpful. I do feel for the people who live on the border of New South Wales and Queensland. I've met a few of them over the last, because some work on one side, live on the other. And yeah, that would just be, I don't think I could deal with it. I actually don't think I could.
I don't know how they do it. And also it blows my mind a little bit. The Northern Territory and South Australia are currently on different time zones.
Yes, they're in the same, they should be, yeah, it's not right.
All right, there you go. We're mandating an end to it. But tell me how it's
Yeah.
your publicity for The Other Bridget been, because you have been on the trail and The Other Bridget is your latest book. Tell us
Yeah.
about
And we actually met in person for the first time
it.
last Monday night. Yeah. No, it's been better than I could have imagined. Everyone's been so lovely and receptive of this book. And yeah, I haven't actually, because it's quite full on. I've had most days 2 events and sometimes events in different states on the same day. So and a bit of travel and stuff. But yeah, so apart from the time thing, messing me out, I haven't felt too tired, touch wood. So yeah, it's been really good because I can actually just enjoy talking to people about the book and thinking about the book, and then having some nice peaceful quiet time in the hotel room in between, which is my absolute, I shouldn't say it's my favorite part of book tours. No, reading the readers are is of course, but it's very nice as someone who lives in quite a hectic house to have time alone in hotel rooms. Yeah.
I can imagine, because running a household is a lot of work and it's 7 days a week. So this is some
So you can just sit
downtime.
back and not worry about, anyone or anyone else. Yeah, it's good.
And of course, you have readers of your own books, but you also run the Rachel Johns online
Yeah.
book club. So from what I've been seeing on your social media, there are some people coming from the book club there. I'm sure they're also your readers, but there are some book
Yeah.
clubs coming as well.
No, definitely. I think we did your book, was it last year or the year before? Time goes so quickly. I think that's when we first had a Zoom chat.
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah. So yeah, the Rachel Johns online book club, which I run with my friend Anthea Hodgson. We've almost got 6,000 members now. And yes, almost without fail, there is always at least a couple to quite a big group of members of the book club come along to events, which is always lovely because it feels like such a community. So to actually meet people in person that you recognize their name or their face from having chatted in the book clubs is just really special.
How long have you been running that book club?
Almost 6 years, I think. It started, I'm trying to think exactly. I know because my friend Anthea's book came out. I did her second book, The Cowgirl, in April. And similarly to how we sort of started chatting a bit after that. I think that after she came along because she lives in WA, I did her book for the 4th month or something. And previously before then, I'd just been sitting on Facebook, chatting to myself. I mean, people were interacting in the comments, but I was doing all the talking. And then because she lived in WA, I said, "Oh, do you want to come along and actually, let's chat about your book face to face?" So she came. I didn't really know her that well before then. We did know of each other, but it was so much better talking with somebody else on the screen, and being able to have a chat and conversation. And so it depends who you talk to, how this went apparently, but I think I told her she was not leaving and that from now on she was running it with me, and she told me that she wasn't leaving and from now on she was running it with me. So one of us thrust the other part. Yeah, anyway, but it's been amazing. I've met great readers, I've met other authors, So yeah, that's just been something, and I didn't actually ever, like, literally I thought about it one day and started it that same day. So
Right.
it wasn't planned very well. So, yeah.
And for anyone who's not a member of your book club, what happens in the book club?
Okay, so you can find us on Facebook. Just look at Rachel John's online book club. We do have 1 month book. We choose a month to chat. So very much like most regular book clubs, except ours is online. And we mostly choose, what we do now is we always choose our books a year, kind of, well, or some a year and ahead, because we ask all the fiction publishers in Australia in about October, what have they got coming next year, so that we can launch the whole year. Which means that we haven't chosen necessarily books that we know we're going to love. We focus on ones that sound interesting, but also ones that are often by debut authors or early kind of emerging authors.
Mhm.
Pretty much all Australian, pretty much all women. And then Anthony and I chat about that book at the end of each month. And we also put 10 questions in the group where people can answer. And it's a live chat, so it's very interactive with the people in the group. But apart from that, it's just become this place where people chat about books, the whole month through. They recommend books they're reading. They ask, it's not all, obviously it's not a nasty place, but it's a reader group. So and we do have plenty of authors in there, but there's no author promo. And if a reader posts something, say they go, which they never would because Sophie's books are all amazing, but say they said, oh, I've just read Sophie's The Fairvale Ladies Literary Club, and I didn't really like this character. We will post that out on there, even if they say something bad about mine or Anthea's books, because it's a reader forum.
Mhm. Yeah. Which, and also the fact that you're supporting emerging authors is fantastic, because it is hard for them to get space. Often in the more commercial fiction space, I think there's probably more opportunity for literary authors when they're
Yeah,
doing
I definitely think that's the case. There's more media in sort of serious newspapers, as we've said, and book festivals.
Yes.
Literary authors are often invited to talk at writing and reading festivals, where us commercial authors, it's a lot, especially the big city ones. I mean, have you been invited to any of the big city ones?
Once for Fairvale on a panel.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're about to tell me that you either never have or rarely have, which, considering how popular you are, just boggles my mind.
I've been invited to Perth twice. This is my second year in that, and so I've never been invited to Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane, or Sydney, any of the, big ones. Actually, I was talking to a literary agent in Australia last night online, and I'll say they, so we don't like, they were saying, oh, maybe I'll see you in Sydney at the Sydney Writers Festival. I laughed. I was like, oh, no, I don't get invited to those type of festivals. And they were horrified. So yeah.
Well,
I
because it
mean,
is
smaller
horrifying.
festivals, I'm sure you've been invited. I've been invited to smaller festivals, and the biggest one I've probably been invited to was Byron Bay Writers Festival, which was amazing. And that's pretty big. But I've been invited to lots of smaller, country town festivals, and they're always amazing. And I love them a lot because, you often get to meet other authors on a much more sort of, that sounds intimate's probably the wrong word. I'm not talking to, but like the bigger festivals, I imagine there's so many people and stuff. Whereas, there might be 5 or 6 authors invited to a small festival. And so you really get to sort of properly meet those authors as well. So I like that. So have you been to those types?
No, I don't tend to
What?
get invited to festivals. I've been invited to, I remember now, I was on a Byron Bay Writers road trip, but both of my festival appearances were around Fairvale, so I haven't been invited to anything since. And you
That's
not being
shocking as
invited to
well.
festivals, but it's just, I also think it's not honoring readers in a way. Like there'll be
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many readers who I'm sure would love to turn up to see you
Mm.
at a festival, not a panel, because you should have a session all to yourself. It's
But also I think like I saw one year at a writers festival in Perth that I wasn't there. I just went as a reader. Um my friend Fiona Palmer and I went to see Di Morrissey speak. And Di Morrissey is a very successful commercial women's fiction author in Australia, right? It's been publishing books for probably 30 years, I'd say. A lot of people buy her book as the big Christmas book for their mum or their sister or whatever. And so we went to this lunch thinking that there would be, 100 or so people there. And there was just a handful of people there. And afterwards, at the signing queue, you always have a big, long, massive queue. And I'm not trying to be a reverse snob and say, that the literary authors or the debut literary authors don't deserve a spot as well. But you often or the nonfiction, about something, you often have this long, massive queue. And then next to it, we had Di Morrissey, some unknown person has a long, massive queue because they've written on some, topics that's perceived as being,
Serious.
important or whatever. And then Di Morrissey had a couple of people and we were like just blown away. And she said, Rach and Fee, this is not our place. Our place are the bookshops and the department stores, and she's right. A lot of as much as it would be nice to be able to speak about some more commercial fiction at readers' festivals, and as you said, the readers would like that. A lot of those literary authors and stuff, that's literally where they get their sales.
That's true.
It's different, but it's still a bit of a touchy thing.
Well, yeah, and also, Di Morrissey is so interesting in so many ways, quite apart from her novel. So even just to hear her talk about her life,
and she was. It was a fantastic lunch, and we felt very, privileged to be in such a small group that you could really, hear her that. But it was just shocking to us,
Yes, look, writers' festivals are a topic I could probably go on about at length, but
we weren't planning on speaking about writers' festivals, but here we are.
Yeah, I think we could sit here going, oh well, we're not being taken seriously as writers because people think we're not writing about serious issues. We know that's not true. I tend to think it's nothing to do with us as writers so much as it is about who they think the readers are who are coming to festivals. And think Di's got a point. Our readers are in bookshops, they're not coming to festivals.
Yeah, exactly. They're reading the books on the weekend instead of going around.
And we love them for it because they're voracious. So many of the readers and they're
time to stuff about it at festivals.
That's absolutely. You're touring the country, Rachael. You certainly don't have time. So I should also say, for those of you who are watching this on video, I've got wet hair because it's Sunday morning and I've been playing tennis and I've had a shower. And
your hair looks gorgeous. I would not. If my hair was wet, it would be an absolute disaster.
Well, it's also because it's Sydney's very humid at the moment. It could take about 12 hours for my hair to dry. So
yes, I remember being there last week and feeling that in Queensland. Yeah.
So one thing that came up when I saw you at your event in Sydney earlier this week was that you mentioned, and something that I talked to you about talking about in this podcast because it was just too interesting a coincidence to not explore, which was that you revealed during the Q&A with Josh Hortonella from Dimmicks, who was doing it with you, that you are the product of an affair.
Yep.
And so am I. So
that is crazy. I think I know one other person apart from you now who is the product of an affair. I don't know about you. How many do you know?
I can't say I've met any others, and also I should say.
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty.
I'm sure there are. But so I'm adopted. So my biological mother and biological father had a fling. He was married. He had another child. He also managed to get his wife pregnant at the same time as my biological mother. So I have a half sister who is 10 days younger than me, who, as far as I know, isn't aware that I exist.
Wow.
And this was something I didn't know until I was over 18, because at the time the adoption laws were such that you could get non-identifying information and then go on a contact register.
Yep.
And so I did that, and because I was curious. I was adopted, grew up with my parents. My brother's adopted. Everyone always says, "Oh, you biologically related." No, that's the nature of adoption. He's born in a separate part of New South Wales, and we're not biologically related, but we're extremely close.
He's your brother in every other way.
Yeah. And so I think that setup helped me understand that your families aren't necessarily made by blood, and relationships can be very close without having a blood relationship. or blood connection rather, and that there are other narratives that can happen. So my story could have been completely different. So
I think about that too sometimes.
yeah. So let's hear your story.
No, well, I just want to ask you, so you cannot, like, this sibling that you've got, the half sibling, that because of the time when you were adopted, you like can't really do anything. You can, or you
Oh
can,
no, I know who she is.
you can't go.
And
You're not going to go and tell her, or
no, I've had people say to me, and she's got a brother as well.
yeah.
So there were two of them, and my biological mother has a daughter who was born quite a few years after me, and I have met her. But I've had quite a few people say to me, "Oh, why don't you just go on one of those Ancestry DNA websites and see if you can, make a connection that way, or find out other relatives?" And I said, actually, the half siblings in particular are the reason why I don't do it, because if they don't know I exist, and suddenly they're on there, and suddenly it turns out that they've got
They can have quite a shock.
a sibling, it's like it's not my place to tell them that story.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like I ethically I have an issue with that,
That's
actually.
so interesting because I was 17, so I'll start, like, that's interesting because I do think it's a very these secrets coming out, and they often come out in fiction, and you see how they can, like, just completely change people's lives for the better, but also for the worse. I should also say, so before I tell you my story, my husband has never met his real dad. Well, he has in theory, because his dad left when he was 2.
Right.
But his mum had him when she was 17. His dad was 19.
Right.
And they got married, but then, because that's what you were, he's 9 years older than me, even probably the time when I was born, that would have been, but it was like, you have to get married, you're pregnant, probably either you adopt the baby out, like happened to you, or you get married. And obviously if you're already married to someone else, it's a bit tricky. But they were young and they were forced to get married basically, and it didn't work out. But he has never wanted to meet his real dad. He did recently find half siblings through a whole weird thing, but he never had that burning passion to know. Whereas
nor did my brother, I've got to say. I think
Yeah.
the boys are different. My brother has always been quite firm about it, not interested.
Yeah, interesting.
Nothing to do with him.
That is so fascinating. Because so I always wanted to know. So like you, I always knew my situation, well, as long as I can remember. Obviously I don't remember a conversation being told. So basically my mum, she was 35 when she had me. She'd been in an on again, off again affair / type relationship. My dad was he was in a reasonably unhappy marriage, and they broke up, sort of separated a little bit here and there. He said he was, the simple story, he said he was going to leave, and, she was in love. And it's just, I think that one of the things that I think is interesting about affairs is, it's not black and white. Like, it's easy to look on and say, well, he was married, you knew that. But I guess when it comes to passions of the heart and love, sometimes it's so strong that it overrides our ethical or moral, values. So anyway, they were in an off again relationship for quite a few years. And then my mum got pregnant with me, and she was 35. That back then, that was considered, it's still considered geriatric. But it was really like considered quite old to have a baby. And so she sort of knew then. She'd been divorced in her early 20s kind of thing, and never found anyone else apart from him. And she knew then kind of it was her chance. If she didn't take this, then she might never have the child that she desperately, or the children that she wanted. So she decided she would. She told my dad about the pregnancy. She said she's having me, whether he wants to be involved or not. And she totally was fine if he didn't want to be involved. And he was obviously back with his wife or something at this stage. And he has four other daughters and one son. Right. So my youngest half sister is 11 years older than me. So they were, he had teenage kids basically at that 11 to 19 at that stage. He decided to bow out. She decided to lean in, and he never paid anything to do with child support or anything. She never asked for a thing from him. Apparently he saw me when I was 4 months old. He came to visit one time, and that was all. He didn't even touch me or pick me up or anything. He just sort of looked at the cot, and that was the last time they, saw each other for quite a long time. And then my mum moved to Australia, so I was born in England.
Right.
But my mum's brother had moved to Australia, and like you guys, she's quite close to him. And I think one of the reasons she moved to Australia was because he was there, but also she said she never wanted my dad to be in and out of my life, how he was in and out of hers. Like she was a grown woman who could make her own choices and deal with the heartbreak and the emotion of, someone who's going back and forth. But she didn't think that was fair on me. So she was like, you can make your decision. You're either in and we tell everyone and, however you're in, or you're out. And so moving to Australia was kind of that, especially in the, early 80s. You can't just jot back and forth. There was no, so it was kind of a big, that was, but so I always knew that I had a dad somewhere. I also always knew that I had half siblings somewhere. And I remember as a child, I'd always be like, so I didn't love being an only child. Like I had a great childhood. My mum was fabulous and all that, but I had friends with siblings, and I was just sort of jealous of that, even though they were jealous, I think, of me. You know what I mean? And so I'd always imagined my older sisters particularly. And so I would, even though I knew that they were probably likely still in England, I was always on the lookout, sort of on the street. Does that person look a bit like me? And there was no DNA or anything testing and stuff, so I never thought about that. But when I got to, so I always wanted to find out, but mum sort of was like, well, we can't do anything to you, you're an adult. This is why I think it's very interesting that you were like, oh, it's not my place. And probably it was, but I was kind of young, and I was like, and whether do I regret knowing or finding out? Sorry, this is a bit of a story. I don't know.
No, I think that we're here for stories, right?
Yeah. But so at like 17, the last year of year 12, I was like, I really want to find my siblings. I was more interested in my siblings knowing than my dad. Like I kind of had this thing. I always said when I was growing up, you don't miss what you don't have, which is weird because I didn't, and that was what I was referring to as my dad. Like I never felt like I was lacking not having a dad. I had a really close grandfather around, and my mum was great, so that didn't bother me. And I never had like a breakup of parents that would have, so that was all fine. But I really did long for siblings. So I really wanted them to know. I didn't know if they did know or anything by this stage. We had no idea in those sort of 18 years what had happened. And back then, you didn't have the internet. So it was like I remember we went to the state library. My mum was like always, okay, I'll help you once you get to 18 kind of thing. But until then, no. So we went to the state library, and back then the state libraries, I mean, they may still, I don't know, we're all on the internet now. The state libraries had all the white pages from all around the world. Like, you know what I mean? So we found the one for the northern part of England, and we looked it up, and there his address and stuff was. So I sent a letter saying that basically I was going to come to England, and I really wanted his family to know. He's still married to his wife. And so, they all found out when I was 18. And I think he sort of felt relieved, actually, because he'd lived this whole life with this big secret. And his oldest daughter, who was 19 when I was born, but she was almost 40 when we met. She they all think she had suspicions. Like I've heard how they all found out and the different reactions they had. My brother was stoked. He was like, great, another sister. He is a bikie, and his sister, wasn't worried about he was like, this is the best news. Two of the sisters, my oldest and one second youngest, were pretty stoked, and they were happy to meet me and stuff. I think they were the least, they're close to their mum, but they were like they were more close to their dad than the others, some kind of thing. And so they were okay with it. Two of the youngest was not okay with it. So it was very different reactions. And I sometimes think, would it have been better to have just stayed secret? I mean, my dad's dead now. His wife is still alive. My older sister is also dead, sadly. Would it have been better to, and I met them all the year I was 18, even the ones that weren't 100%, happy about it. And I stayed in contact with 3 of them quite a lot. And I'm still in contact with my brother and the half sister who was close. But like I think, it would have been better. No, what did it add to my life? Really, we were so far apart. Did it cause upset, you know, to his wife and some of his kids, although I think his wife, you know, had her suspicions kind of as well. But then at the same time, I feel like they also have a right to know. Like my brother was stoked to have somebody else. And it's funny, my sister, half sister, who I am still kind of in contact with, mostly through Facebook, she actually rang me a couple of months ago, and it was like 5 a.m. my time. I was like, what the hell? You know, because I thought, this is bizarre. To be honest, this is terrible. Hopefully none of them listen to this. I was like, someone must have died, you know, like it
Which is your
literally.
first thought at a 5 a.m. phone call, right?
Yeah, and the fact that we never really talk to each other, it's just so I'm thinking, and I was like, I'm too tired to deal with this. I can't, like, I don't even really care. That sounds horrible because I'm not close, you know, like what I mean? Like I don't know them. And so it's not that I don't care, but I'm not going to be devastated. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is. So I was like, I can't deal with this. So I just let it go. And then she starts ringing again. And I was like a little bit more awake now. And I thought, better answer it. So I answer it in the dark, like of the FaceTime. And it's her. She's completely drunk. And she was with our cousin, and she just literally told her cousin, who is like, so she's 13 years older than me. So that means she's just turned 60, I think, or even, maybe a little older. And he's, you know, a couple of years younger than her. And it was the first time he'd ever heard this story, you know, as a cousin. And he was like stoked, you know, it's like, oh, I want to meet you and all this different stuff. So people do respond very differently. But yeah, I always think actually it would have been better. It may have who knows, life would have gone hugely different ways. But I feel like it would have been better if they were told right when it happened. You know what I mean? Because there's a betrayal, but there's also if you hold something for that long, then it becomes more than just a sort of betrayal. Exactly, kind of. Yeah, if you know what I mean. I can't explain. Yeah.
Well, because I have heard of quite a few people who weren't told they were adopted until they were adults. So
Yeah.
Judith Lucy, the comedian, talks. This happened to her. In fact, she was told by a cousin, I think, at Christmas.
Oh, geez, that would be.
And well,
not
to
even
know
my
that everyone else knows and you don't
Yes,
know.
exactly.
And I never think that's right, because then what you're dealing with,
No.
yes, is the betrayal of being everyone's known and
lied to you really a whole lot. And
to
they
keep, yeah.
Yeah, no, that must be really hard. So I guess in all of these situations, affairs, adoption stuff, everyone has to make a decision at some stage how they're going to play it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think everyone mostly makes the decision that, oh, there's two ways, I guess, you make a decision. It's either to protect yourself or it's to protect them, or it's both. But, you know, you can never know how everyone's going to react. And so you just got to do, I guess, what you've got to do at the time or you think's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
what you can live with maybe as well.
I tend to think the adults in the situations do what suits them and what protects them.
Yes,
which is
even though they may be thinking they're doing it, or they like to lie, they might be lying to themselves as well.
Yeah,
you know, lying to themselves that they're doing the right thing for.
And I can't blame anyone at all. And I have to say, I don't wish my life turned out differently.
Yeah, either do I. So that's what I mean. And if different decisions were made, then life could have changed out quite differently. You know,
but it does eliminate, I guess, for us as writers as well, the role of secrets and lies in because I am a secret, and would have been the subject of a lot of lies.
Yeah, which I was too. I mean, for half, you know, it definitely is. Being I always joke, being someone's dirty little secret kind of thing.
Which is kind of it's kind of weird. It's I guess there's no such thing as a normal family framework. I don't think there's no such thing as normal happy, normal sad.
And I think so much more is coming out now because of DNA and because of Facebook and social media. My auntie, a few years after I found, so my auntie is like, you know, 30 or so years older than me, and this is my mum's sister-in-law, so her brother's wife. She found out a few years, for about 10 years after I had all this, you know, everything come out and I'd met them and stuff, that her parents had a child and adopted the child before they got married. So, and they never told them that her parents are both dead. And this child so this four. My auntie has three sisters, well, four, including this one, and she's fully their sister.
Yeah.
But she lived a life being adopted by another family because the parents had her young and out of wedlock, and they stayed together, and then they, but I guess also because of closed adoption and stuff, this is 75, almost 80 years ago when this happened now. You make that decision, you can't change it. You can't go, oh, hang on, now we're married, now we're established and we're in a situation where we could take that child back. You can't go and grab a 5-year-old from the house they've grown up in. So I think there's so many, because of society being like dark on babies outside of wedlock. Obviously there's so many of those types of stories, but we're hearing them more, or they're being able to be connected more now because and it must be so much harder to hide an affair now, or if something like this happens, you know what I mean?
Well, a lot of people leave digital footprints for everything they do. So yeah.
Exactly. So I guess, yeah, it's interesting. The secrets are probably harder to keep now. Which makes, I'm going to ask you a question. Didn't we even talk about this before when I interviewed you for the online book club? Maybe I have talked about this with no, I did a TikTok or something, and I think you talked about it too. Like how, as contemporary writers, and you fall in an interesting space because you're not like really far past historical, are you? You write sometimes
80s, 90s,
80s and stuff, which most of us think this is yesterday, right? When someone talks about the 90s or something, you're like, oh yeah, and then you realize, oh no, it's actually quite a long time ago now. But I've always said that writing contemporary fiction is much harder. It's a bit tongue in cheek because I know but writing contemporary fiction is harder because we don't have all these things these days that are illicit and taboo. You can have sex out of marriage. You can be a single mum. I'm not saying all this stuff's easy necessarily, different, but you can be gay. Nobody's going, well, you might, it's much more acceptable than it was. You can get married in Australia, if you're gay or a lesbian, there's so many different things, and there's medical advances that, even when you were at the Fairvale Lady Literary Club, if someone had a serious illness, then they might not have survived it, but it might be an illness that now they would survive, or they'd be, and there's the whole adoption laws and stuff that you spoke about that have changed so much in the last, so I always think it's harder because secrets are, the lifeblood of fiction in a way, I feel, you know what I mean?
Well, I completely agree, which is the term secrets and lies is something that I often think about in plotting or coming up with storylines.
You've got to have some good secrets, some good lies.
Yeah. So, and they're the engine of the action often, or of the drama at least. It's like, what's the secret being withheld, or what's a lie that's been told? Because people will go to extraordinary lengths to protect them, as you and I have experienced in our own lives.
Yeah. Yes. But that's harder these days to find, I think, to make those secrets and lies believable. So you have to find new ones as well. Yeah. What are we lying about today? And what are we hiding today?
Yeah. People are lying about what they really look like because they're putting
true.
That's true.
They're lying about what they really look like. They're lying about how happy they are.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. When I said that's a good one, that sounds terribly cynical.
No, I know what you mean though,
Yeah, but you're right. People are lying about how happy they are because of this imperative to have, I suppose, the Insta-ready family life, home life. And what's interesting about TikTok partly as a platform is the lack of veneer on a lot of things. You can be in your car, as a lot of people are on TikTok, and video, but you wouldn't see it on Instagram.
Yeah, that's so true. And you can lie, to some extent, about who you are on dating apps and all those sort of things, because you can make your sort of create who you are. And
that's lying about how happy we are. That's a really great way to put it. And now I'm thinking of the amount of performance that goes on attached to that on dating apps, for example, or on various social media platforms, and whether that has fed into why TikTok has exploded, because it's seen as being authentic. Although I do think there is crafting that goes on.
There's a bit of both. There's a bit of both, is there? We should ask, if we have any listeners by this stage or whatever, what do they think people are lying about at this this era? Because this can help us for fiction, people. Tell us your lies so we can put them in books.
And also send us your questions. I should say that, you know, we are hoping this will be an interactive podcast where writers can send us their writing conundrum, and we'll discuss it and perhaps help them solve it. If you're a reader who is just wanting some agony aunts, we're here because we solve a lot of problems for our characters.
Yeah,
and
true.
happy to solve yours too if we can.
Or if there's something about the book industry you are not sure about or you're curious about, between us, we might be able to answer it, since we've both been in different types of, well, I think between us, we've been writers, editors, agents, worked in bookshops, worked in libraries. So
Yeah.
we may be able to help.
Yes, we may well be able to help. So I will put an email address, which will probably be mine, in the show notes. But also, I think when you and I are posting on social media, if people want to just comment, we can collect things from there. And hopefully we get some questions. Otherwise, you and I will just keep talking to each other. There'll no doubt be things to discuss.
Exactly. Well, let's talk, because I want to know, you said that your affair, just before we started, or not your affair. I don't know.
The affair that resulted in me.
Yeah. This is a different story. I'm not saying Sophie's had an affair, people. Just I don't know either way. But let's just put that out there. I'm not referring to an affair that Sophie has had. Okay. I was meaning that she, like me, being the child of the affair. You said that being raised being that born into that situation has affected your writing.
Well, in that it's probably fired my imagination. I was writing a lot of stories as a kid, but I guess being adopted was something that made me aware from a really young age that there were other potential storylines for me that did not happen. Sometimes I would wonder about my brother's family, although he doesn't, so I don't spend too much time on it. But just that idea that there are all these parallel narratives that could be existing, and there are theories of time, of course, that say that there are parallel dimensions of time.
I love that. So fascinating.
So it's like, well, there's a different version of my life that runs in that I didn't meet my parents, I didn't meet my brother. It was an accident of the state government's list making that I ended up in the family I'm in, basically.
Yeah, it's amazing. Did you I was going to say then something about, no, lost it.
Interestingly, I will say, when my parents went to apply for adoption, they were told that if they wanted a blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby, it would take longer.
Wow. Nobody gives up blonde-haired, blue-eyed babies. Oh my gosh.
Right, my mother's blue-eyed. I think that maybe that was partly why
they were saying if they wanted to have one that looked a bit more like them or something. Okay, that's slightly. I was going to say, have you ever worried, or has your brother, probably not, that you might meet someone, like what if you met your real brother, like, and didn't know you were together?
Well, no, I know their names.
Okay.
So I know
so
their
you'd
names.
be okay. Yeah, because I think that's one of the
I had some communication with Bio Dad for a while via letter, and his return address was the family home, and I knew he was still married. So I presumed his wife knew. And he has since died, and out of curiosity, again with the secrets and lies, out of curiosity, I just Googled to see, because
we can do that now.
Somewhat well known in his local community, and I won't say where that is, but the stuff that was in the local paper was all about what a fine, upstanding citizen he was, and paragon of virtue, etc., etc. And I said to my mum,
hilarious,
he got away with it.
Hilarious. So you're not worried about running into one of them falling madly in love, and then realizing, whoops.
No, and as someone who used to watch reruns of the TV series Sons and Daughters, that was so it was occasionally on my mind, but no, what happened.
That's so funny. I also think, because I also do think, because my husband has 4 half siblings. His dad was a bit of he had him, and then he married, I don't know if he married someone, then he had another child and then left. Right. And then he had 2 more, and I don't know if he stayed with their parent mum or whatever, but there's 3. So my husband has 3 siblings, and I have 3 half siblings. I have 5 half siblings, and they've all had kids. Like, actually, apart from my brother, 2 of mine haven't, but all of Craig's have, all of mine have. And I sometimes think about, well, the world is weirdly, I have 3 kids. What if they met up? It's a bit of a worry. But I think that's interesting. Like, all the how everything that happens in your life, I guess, does shape your writing in in some way. I would actually say, I think I mentioned before, it shaped my reading a bit as well. Like, I think every reader takes into each book you read, like we take our own personal experiences, right? I guess the same as writing. And like sometimes the emotions at the time, you might not like something, but if you read it a couple of months later and you're a different headspace, maybe you would. But I find that books about affairs, I'm a bit more judgmental on. I have to really, really believe the affair, because I met my dad when I was 18, obviously. And my mum and him briefly saw each other, like as swapping me over, kind of the only custody exchange they've ever had. Because, I was 18 in a foreign place, and mum came with me, and she sort of just delivered me to meet him in a pub. And then she went away because she's like, I don't need to be here, and it's my time to sort of, but you could just see in that brief exchange how much love they actually had for each other. And I think it's really tragic to me. Like, it's clear when talking to my mum that he was the great love of her life. And when talking to him for that, I can see that she was the great love of his life too. And
Rachael,
it's so,
this is sad.
it is sad. And it just shows that life, so I know that their affair, as I said earlier in the day, wasn't just, one late night fumble in a pub and they accidentally, they got a bit overheated or whatever and decided to, and then, it was a real connection on multiple levels that I think it was clear from speaking to him and even from speaking to some of my siblings that he doesn't have that with his wife, or he didn't have that with his wife. They were both Catholics. You got married, you stayed married, kind of thing. And so it's that whole thing about, you said, like, different situations in life, if you've met at different time or whatever. And I suppose it's part of me thinks, because my mum's not with anyone now and she never really has been, since. And she's quite happy in that way, like I always joke that my mother-in-law and my mother are, they were like, that I understand, if I ever, my husband died or he left, I would be quite happy being by myself, you know what I mean? And they're very much like that, they've got, but I also think that she had that great love and it didn't work, kind of thing. And that makes me very more critical of reading affairs in books, because I have to really believe it, because I do think having an affair is risky. You can sacrifice, as we both said, you can sacrifice a lot of things. Your dad could have lost his two other children, and, there's a lot at risk. So I feel like, I don't know, maybe I don't like reading in books when it just doesn't seem really like, it's hard to explain. Like, if I don't buy that they're prepared to risk everything, if they're just doing it, and I think you've got a lot to risk, you wouldn't risk all that, for this
the
guy.
stakes need to be appropriate.
Yeah, because I don't buy the connection between them, and I think, no, you wouldn't do that because you actually care about these other people. So I think it has to be a really strong, I guess it's the same in all relationships in fiction, though. I have to buy, really believe that these people, whether they're friends or romantic interests, like, actually I have to believe in that connection for me to buy the story.
Yeah, which I think we can see in your writing, because there is always so much heart and authenticity in the connections between
Thank
people.
you.
So that's come through in everything you write. And arguably that wouldn't be there without
true. Like,
your background. Yeah.
Everything shapes us, doesn't it, to where we are today. I'm trying to think, because I have read all your fiction novels, I think, because I know I'm just thinking, have you written, and this is because I don't know about you, but I basically forget a book as soon as I've read it.
Absolutely. Yes. God.
Even if I absolutely love it, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I really like this book, but I couldn't tell you the names of the character. Have you written about an affair?
Yes, not as a central storyline, but I've had references.
Like
so in Fairvale, one of the characters, it was a backstory thing. She'd had an affair. Yeah, they have this, but again, I'm now seeing going, do you know what am I?
Yeah, because I'm thinking the same. Like, a lot of books I read, I find there's like, I love Ellen Hildebrand. Pretty much all her books have some sort of cheating in it.
Again, secrets and lies being the engine of fiction.
Yeah. And often I guess that's the certain big things in fiction that just come up lots, because they are like some of the big secrets and lies that we deal with in everyday life, I guess. But I think I've done, like you, sort of a not a subplot probably, but I've never actually written a book. Like, people hear my story and they're like, oh my gosh, you should. And that was what I told you was kind of small in terms of the blow up or happened, when everyone found out, and there's 5 people apart from, I never met his wife, but there's 5 siblings, they all reacted very, very differently, and they all had things going on in their lives at the time, which I won't say because it's not my place, and it could be, but it was like this big drama, like TV show where, I mean, every single one of them, I can say one was getting married, so that was all, but there was illnesses, there was addictions, there was divorce, all that. Everyone seemed to have something really big going on at the time they found out about me. And I just think when people hear that whole story, they're like, oh my gosh, you should write about that. And I have never managed to write about, like, I've never thought how I would write that story. So yeah, I was just curious, like, have you written bits of your past into stuff?
Not well. I've only written the occasional thing about my personal story, because I was very sick 12 years ago, and I did put a very dramatic part of that in Shelley Bay towards the end. But I haven't. I've had references to adoption. In Fairvale, there was a child who was going to be adopted towards the end of that. But I haven't written an adoption storyline either.
It's so funny
because maybe we don't need to. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Speaking of, I'm writing it, not next, but the next book, because I've sort of got 2 contracted and I kind of know what they are. So the next women's fiction book is about 2 women who are approaching their 50s, and they're adopted. They're twins.
Right.
So yeah, I might have to pick your brains on.
Absolutely. You can always do it. We can always do it via a podcast, Rachel, if you wanted to.
Yes, we do a brainstorm, podcast brainstorm, research. Yeah.
But I guess isn't that and that's interesting that neither one of us has actually explored the quite unusual aspects of our coming into being through fiction. But I do think for me, writing about friendships between women and those being very close, I've certainly seen that in my mother's life with her friends, but also that understanding, as I said, that a blood relationship is not necessarily the determinant of closeness.
So true. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, I'm as close. I would say my cousins are closer to me. They're almost like siblings to me, even though we grew up together when we were little and my mum first moved out here, but then we had quite a few years apart. But as adults, we've all become, quite close. So yeah, it's all the different, and then friends, of course. The other day, a friend, Anthea, my friend, and I were doing an event, and we want to do the podcast together. So we do a lot of, things together. And someone in the audience said to her, "Oh, you two are like sisters." And so I'm not going to say what she said back to get her in trouble, but like, it shows that you can get these really special bonds with different people, and you never know when they're going to come up, and it doesn't have to be about blood.
No, I mean, my brother and I can have whole conversations without saying a word. Like, we can sit across the table and just basically converse with our.
Is he younger or older than you?
He's 2 years younger. And so for me, like, when he arrived, I can still remember going to get him. He was born in a place in northern New South Wales. It was very cold. I can still remember wearing my favorite dress.
You're so excited.
There aren't photos of it, so it's definitely a memory. It's not like I've seen it.
That's amazing.
But my mother was very smart because she made me think that he was mine to look after. So I was quite convinced that I was dressing this child, I was feeding this child, I was doing everything for this child. So I couldn't quite understand what she was doing. And I also especially couldn't understand why he seemed to like her so much, since I was the one in charge. So I was actually jealous of my mother, not of the baby.
That is so funny. But yeah, interesting, because obviously she wanted you to have that really close bond. And
well, she's a pediatric nurse. She had been, and so I think she was just really used to how to get children to get along. And he had always felt like my particular not project, but he was mine. He was all mine.
Yeah. Oh, that's so gorgeous. I love it.
So yeah, we're still close, and we also have I think having that structure enabled us to open our hearts really to someone else who I consider now my youngest brother, who's quite a few years younger. My mother looked after him when he was a baby and a little boy. His mother's a sole parent, and so they've become part of the family. And I realized at a certain point I was going to have to come up with a way to introduce him to people. And I just said to him, it makes sense to just call you my littlest brother, even though he's like 6 foot tall. And he looked delighted. And so I thought, okay, well, lovely. I've got another brother.
Yeah, oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah. So I'm pretty lucky with the two of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, that's gorgeous.
So so writing wise, what are you up to? You said you've got two looming.
Yeah, well, at the moment, it's funny, I don't know about you, but so I put to bed a week or so ago, just basically the same week that my book came out, The Other Bridget, I finished writing the first draft, which then said to my publisher of the book comes out at the end of this year. But now I'm kind of gearing up to, because that's going to be away for a few weeks with edits, and I've got I do have quite a tight deadline schedule. I don't necessarily have to stick with it but I'm starting to, aim towards hopefully having a book out at the beginning of next year like this one. So I've got to really get onto that. And that's what's contracted. But so I've written a chapter of that. And so now I'm sort of, this morning I just sort of, and I start thinking, I don't know, do you like, now I'm ready, that my brain is cleared of the other things. It's, so I just, various things sort of come into my head and I was like, oh, we'll just write that down so I'm kind of in that, just thinking about the book, ready to start writing after I get back. I don't know about you, but I don't know how you do this actually. You probably can, because I know you write on your commute. Is that right?
Yeah.
From
Yes,
work?
mostly. Yeah.
And like you have a full-time job, because I find, so the last week or so of just talking about to people and, doing book events and traveling and stuff, I hear other people who are like that they would write in the evening in hotels, or they'll get up early and continue to write. I don't know if it's just a mental thing or whatever, and I'm just lazy, but I find there's no way I can write while I'm in promotional period.
Oh yeah, Rachel, you're definitely lazy. I was just saying to someone the other day, Rachel John, she's like the laziest author in Australia. But I think it makes sense because you're talking, particularly when you're doing publicity, you're talking so much about the storyline of the other bridge.
You're in a different.
Very hard to think about creating a new storyline or continuing one that started, because and they're different rhythms. I often think about it in terms of rhythm. So writing rhythm is great. There's a certain flow to it. Rewriting rhythm I find harder because it's more staccato.
Yeah.
So like this thing where I'm trying to get into, and so if I have to write new chapters when I'm redrafting, that's the best part, because then they flow.
Oh, really? I hate writing new chapters after I've yeah, I don't know. I feel like so that's interesting. But it's true, it's different. Yeah, you're right. I like that rhythms, because I kind of know, and you're right. Like there's no point like just rushing and churning. I think we need that rest as well between, for me, I need sort of a bit of rest between books, and I don't always have much because of but I know that it's important that time just to read. I'm reading a book about an affair, to think, just to experience life and sort of, so I'm now in that thinking period, even though I have a pretty good idea about what's going to happen in this book. It's like the characters start shape. So that's where I am, and I'll be hopefully starting to write that in about a week, but then I'll have to stop for edits for the next. So what about you? Where are you in the writing period, apart from just a beautiful cover?
Yes, I've just announced our art hour at the Duchess Hotel, and that I've just received the copy edit for it. So those came sort of on adjacent days, the announcement of the edit arriving. The copy edit, thankfully, is light, but there's still some things to think about. And I don't tend to extensively revise when I'm copy editing, because I like it to come out the way I want it to be, basically.
I like copy edits for that reason. It's kind of like you've done most of the hard work by that stage. It's just kind of finesse.
And I also realize how much I edit while I write. I never used to think I did. I used to think I used to write and move on, until one day I was Control-Zing, because I use keyboard shortcuts. So I was Control-Zing or Command-Zing if you're on an Apple, a sentence, thinking that the thing I'd changed out of that I wanted back was only a couple of keystrokes ago, and it was like 30.
Wasn't.
And I was going, I thought, I
hate that. I've done that too. I'm like, where is it? And then I start panicking that I'm changing stuff that I didn't want to change, because it's all
which is where Control-Y comes in. It's like, okay, no, go back. So that was instructive though, because I thought, I didn't realize that I edit as much as I do while I'm writing. So
I do too. I do edit quite a lot. We should do a whole episode on how we write and edit.
Like I'm writing down these ideas, Rachel.
Yeah. Well, your cover is beautiful, and I think as an author, one of the most exciting things is, and scary before you actually see the cover. Do you have much say in your cover?
Not really, but which is not a bad thing because I think when Fairvale came out, that set the cover
Yeah,
look
they did such a
way.
good job with that.
So since then, it's basically been just
You've been
what
very
color
well
is it?
branded. Yeah. Which is no, it's so sounds weird, isn't it? Like you're like a cattle if they've branded you. But it's very important as an author. Like I think, you from the start had a really clear look, which
Mhm.
helps people to know what they're going to get and to recognize you if they, even if, not everyone, surprise, surprise, is on social media and following us, but then, so when they go into the shops, I think they immediately will know, oh, hang on, I read a book like that last year and that's that cover. And, it's, it's the same but different.
It is. And when I put the title on Weekends with the Sunshine Gardening Society, I had a strong feeling that would be a yellow cover.
Yeah.
And it was. But that's part of it, as you know, that putting a title on is and conceptualizing how it will be going out to readers is a big part of what we do because, well, at least I think you're like me in that we like to communicate with our readers. We're not
Yeah.
just writing for our own entertainment.
No.
We're telling a story to people and we start thinking about how that story gets told right at the start.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, so much to talk about. People will be
I
sick of
think
hearing that.
for today, Olivia, because you at the time we're talking are heading out to do some publicity for the other Bridget. So
Yeah.
you might want to power down and rest your voice and maybe read.
Yes, that's a good idea. Well, thank you so much. That was a fun chat as usual.
It was absolutely. So I'm going to stop recording now. This is the official part of the business. I'll stop recording.
Okay.
Rachel and I will continue to chat after we stop recording. We'll see you next week.
See ya.